Good evening to everyone, and I'm glad to be and honored to be hosting the first in-person event of CODOP dedicated to product management, and as Katrina mentioned, in the new offices that are becoming a bit small already, so potentially we have to move soon. So yeah, and especially an honor to be here with these top female role models that we have here today, and I'm glad that you took the time to come here today. Good evening, Denise, and good evening, Megan. So before introducing our guest speakers, I would like to talk briefly and share a word about CODOP as well, as Katrina was already mentioning. CODOP is an international technology school and also founded in 2018 and led by amazing, inspiring women who we are all working and supporting, providing opportunities to women, trans, and non-binary students and professionals. So CODOP is not only training courses, it's more about a community. A community, as Katrina was mentioning, based on friends. Friends who happen to be teachers, students, mentors, ex-students, and even students now professionals that have emerged thanks to this journey. So I'm glad to be part and also instructing the product management course for almost 1 year, and happy to be part of this transitioning movement that we are building here together. So mainly what we want to see in a near future, and I think Denise and we talked about this recently in one of our talks, to be able to, in the years to come, not talk anymore about gender and talk about what matters, which is creating value, regardless of the industry, especially in tech, right? So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our first guest speaker, Megan Murphy. Megan is currently the VP of Product at Hotjar, and Megan has a large and inspiring experience around the world. She's been leading product teams in countries like Brazil, Spain, and even San Francisco, at well-known companies that we already know about: Skyscanner, N26, and even Microsoft. Our second and good friend, Denise, and she's the Director of Product at Caravelo. But also Denise has an amazing experience in different and broad industries related to tech, like for example, e-commerce, travel tech, big data, machine learning, and she's also been part of great companies like Microsoft, Expedia, and Hotels.com. So Denise, it's glad to see you again. So to break the ice, I would like to start with essential product management questions, especially for our students and professionals who are maybe thinking about transitioning into product management or beginning this journey, or maybe they are already part of it. So I'll start with Megan. I'm sure, by the way, you have the mic there if you want to, okay. Yeah, so I'm sure you've been asked this question a lot of times, but how would you describe product management or the product management role from your experience?
So I would say that the product management discipline is one that's quite nascent, actually. There are long-standing university degrees and programs you can study in engineering and in design and in other disciplines. But product management, as you know if you know CODOP, is still quite young in its own journey to figure out what the discipline is. An analogy that I like to use is that it's sort of like the conductor of a symphony. They're not playing an instrument, they're not writing code, they're not actually strumming a bass or a viola or something like that, so they're not making the designs, but they are the one who is helping everybody else see how their value, what their contributions can do to result in something hopefully beautiful, something that creates value, something that makes change. And so I think the product management discipline is about what makes a good conductor. Sometimes it's hopefully it's frequently coach, sometimes it's cheerleader, sometimes it's critic, sometimes it's expert, sometimes it's student. It's all of these things, and because the discipline is so young, I think all of us get to shape what it becomes.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. Would you agree with that, Denise?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, when I was a individual contributor product manager, it was the job of finding out why. Like, why are we doing this? What is this? What does it mean? Because engineering knew and the business knew, but sometimes they weren't the same things. And being that person who could see it from all the angles and from the top down as well. And it's a weird role because you don't have any authority, but you have all the accountability, and you have to know how to manage all of that. So it's a lot of social skills as well, and curiosity.
Which skills would you say they are essential to succeed in this role, for example?
For me, I'm hiring right now. I'm looking for a senior product manager if anyone is looking. I always say that it's a personality more than a skill set. I need people who are curious, who want to learn more, who want to be in the driver's seat. I figured the small things, I can teach you everything except how not to be an asshole. So I've had worked with product managers from all different disciplines. I mean, I'm a former engineer. I just happen to like to control things, so it's a great career for a control freak.
So you'd say you were born to be a product manager?
My husband tells me that. So.
Okay, nice. And talking about leadership, since it's very related to product management positions, Megan, what are the key factors to building a good product team from your experience?
So I think one of the most important things in building a good product team is to recognize where you already have strengths and where you have gaps. So this might mean that Denise just mentioned that there's product managers who come from different disciplines, and actually if you do a search on LinkedIn, you'll see like growth PM or even like retention PM or these very niche parts of the discipline, technical product manager, of course. I think building a well-rounded team, so not hiring for the same kind of one-size-fits-all approach. I'm not an engineer by background. I'm not a designer by background. I studied finance, and that was a bad fit, so I bailed quickly on that career path. I'm from New York. They kind of pump it in the water that you're supposed to go work on Wall Street, and I did that, and I realized I didn't like it. So I think finding product folks who come from different backgrounds, have different social styles, like if you're thinking about, the Myers-Briggs or the social styles, you don't necessarily want a team of entirely analytical product managers or expressive. You want a balance of all of these different things. And I think what it takes to build a great product team is also just using positive reinforcement, regardless of somebody's background, to show the behaviors that you want to drive. If your business is in a moment where you need to take more risk and you need to innovate because your category is heating up, then you need to reward good behavior when product managers are taking risks so that anybody from any background knows what you're trying to optimize for. But if you're trying to incrementally move tiny metrics here and there, then you want to reward those behaviors of robust experimentation culture and not necessarily something that's proven off of just qualitative research. So I think it depends, like stage of the company, the goal, the kind of product org you want to build. Let's also not forget that the product org doesn't live in a vacuum. So there's also all these other disciplines, and it depends on the dynamic that they have with other disciplines as well to figure out what kind of team you need to get the company where you want to go.
What would you say that makes the difference between a good product manager and a great product manager?
I think that a great product manager has well-developed judgment muscles. And unfortunately, there's no magic pill for this. There's no panacea. It takes judgment to figure out how to pursue an opportunity. So I mentioned experimentation. That is one way. If you run an A/B test and you have a control and a variant, you'll get some statistically significant results if you have enough traffic to support that. And then you can decide from the results of this experiment if you should turn left or right. But you don't always have every part of your product with a high degree of traffic to run experiments, otherwise you're going to waste a ton of time. So in those cases, you need to find other ways to de-risk what you're thinking about. You have to have the judgment to say, no, I don't need to run an A/B test for a month. I'm going to go talk to 5 customers. Or I don't even need to do any of this because the market is clearly moving in this direction. So I think a great product manager has the judgment of which different tools to use from their toolkit and when, and they're not afraid to mess up. And that is the most important thing. Like a product manager who's too scared to make changes and sits there with indecision, that's not even a good PM. That's just someone who maybe doesn't have the operating environment or the safety to make mistakes, and that's a whole different topic.
Yeah, and related to this topic, I think as well, conflict is something that it happens a lot in this position, because you feel you're in between stakeholders and decision making. And I've heard from different of my students and also in different environments that product managers, junior and senior product managers, sometimes might feel the punching bag of an organization, right? What would you say about that, Denise?
I think that if you're a punching bag as a PM, your company might be doing it wrong. One of the hugest skills you need as a PM is stakeholder management. And that just means, who am I making this for? Not just my customers, but who within the company is my ally and my customer, whether that's engineering or customer success or even the executive team. And developing the kind of relationship where you can have honest conversations about what is and is not possible, and what we should do, and we can align on that. And it's okay to disagree. I disagree a lot with the executive team that I work with, but I wouldn't say you're a punching bag, because I think that a really good product manager has the ability and the desire to make the decisions, so that you don't get punched. It's like, this is why, and you're able to back up your decisions with data.
Would you say, is it important for them to learn how to say no in specific situations in the company? Because sometimes, if on the other side, one of the stakeholders might be someone in C-level or management positions, or even your boss, that gets a bit challenging for product managers to, stick to your decision and say no. And from my experience, I've seen that this is a problem, difficult to overcome for a lot of people, especially people that might feel, intimidated, especially.
So I think that it's learning how to say no with conviction and empathy is core to the discipline. Especially in a product manager's own prioritization of their time. So let's say I'm a product manager and my boss asks me, can we figure out if this opportunity is worth pursuing? Should we make this new feature? If I can't reasonably do that in some amount of time, I need to learn how to say, actually, no, I can't do that this week. I can't do that until next week. So I think there's cases where you need to say no on your own scope and your own work. Mm-hmm. When it comes to working with stakeholders in different disciplines across the business, I absolutely think it's important to be able to say no, like I said, with conviction and with empathy, but I also encourage product managers on my team to reserve the no for really, really important moments where the answer is no, and try sometimes to use not now, here's why. Right? Because I don't think that there's many decisions that are a one-way door that you can never walk back through. So if you say not now, we're not going to walk through that door right now, we could keep it on the table. Here's why that's less important than these other things we need to go prioritize. So I think that stakeholders tend to respond better to not now, here's why, than an outright no. That said, you need to have the muscle to say no when you need to.
Embracing the no is one of the most important skills you can gain as a product manager. If you are the one who says yes to everything because you're intimidated or you feel pressure, eventually down the line you're going to have to pay that bill. In either, like, your stakeholders are going to never trust you, your engineering team may not trust you, your customers may not want your product because you haven't been honest with what is possible. But I expect it from people who work for me as well. Like, I tell my boss no, I expect them to push back and tell me when I need a no. Embracing the no is something my boss says to me a lot, even though he doesn't like it when I do it. But you have to also be in the kind of space where that's okay. I've been in companies where you do say no and there's consequences for you personally. Yeah. So, it's also a skill, but you have to be in the right setting as well.
Okay, so related to actually stakeholders and communication skills, that takes me to the topic, like, would you say the right way of communicating to engineers might be different to communicating with business stakeholders? Should product managers be more concerned about communication skills and the audience they're speaking to?
Tailoring your message to the audience is another influencing skill. Like Expedia sent me to a seminar years ago on how to influence people, and I thought, like, this is weird, am I selling something? But yeah, we actually are. And part of that is tailoring to, is it a technical audience? Do you need to go into details? Is it executive audience that doesn't know anything, they just want the summary? Is it sales that want to know, like, what value are we bringing? It's super important that you know who you're speaking to, because you're always speaking for the product.
I would just say that there is no right way to communicate. I don't believe there's a right and a wrong for most things in life. So I think the point is, as Denise alluded to, get your message to land. Think about who you're speaking to, no matter if they're an engineer or a sales colleague or even a customer. Figure out what their motives are, remind them of your shared objectives, operate within the context of the values you see around you, and use that to guide how you communicate with different people. Because as a PM, it's really you that needs to be the chameleon in how you make sure that the message you send is the message you want to land with somebody else.
Now, talking about more individual experiences, since you have a lot, I would like to address obstacles, because I think those are the best way to learn for most of us. So Megan, would you explain to us one of your most challenging or difficult experiences as a PM, and which were your learning outcomes? So potentially our students and professionals can relate to that.
As a product manager working on a squad, I think the biggest mistake I've made is building the wrong thing. And that happens.
That's a big mistake.
Yeah, it's a big mistake. It's costly. If you are not in an environment with psychological safety, then like Denise said earlier as well, you might have personal consequences to pay. Thankfully, I did not have that. I had an environment that encouraged taking risks and even messing up. But yeah,
It's not that common.
I spent 6 months working with a team when I was here at Skyscanner, and we built the wrong thing. We invested in a complex way to make travel bookings that probably didn't need to be built. I'm proud of that, because if you go somewhere and like an icebreaker question is, what's the biggest mistake you've made or whatever, like you don't want some bullshit boring answer that people are like, oh, that's not very interesting, right? You need to collect these stories throughout your life of some failures and ways that you didn't hit the metrics you wanted, you didn't have the impact you wanted, you wasted people's time. I mean, that's the hardest thing as a PM, is like you're working with, it could be 5 engineers and a designer. In my case right now, in my role at Hotjar, it's 180 people whose work is essentially what I prioritize in my role. And building the wrong thing, the stakes are a lot higher now than they were back then. I don't think I would be trusted in my role now if I wasn't willing to buck up and make some mistakes. And I'm glad that I did that when I wasted this 6 months of 6 people and not right now.
And it's good because you can also inspire others that might be starting the journey and making similar mistakes, right? Because it's very important for PMs not to feel lonely. And I think it's good when you find someone that connects with you and says, look, this happened to me and these were my learning outcomes and it's going to be okay, you know, like. What would you say, Denise? You're laughing.
Well, my background in tech is in search, which is a very niche subject. So when I started being a product manager of search, I was generally brought into companies at the point where they realized they didn't really know how to do it, so they needed someone who did know how to do it, which sounds amazing, but it happened more than once. I was brought into a company that wanted to revitalize its search. And like my personal trainer used to say to me, everything that must be changed must first be completely broken down. And that's true as well if you're trying to change how you do things in a company. So more than once I found myself, once I was in a company, in that role that no one really wanted to change. They wanted to do everything better, but not in a way that would make anybody uncomfortable. and pretty much that means nothing changes. So I've had to learn to recognize when I'm approached for a job, is this a situation I'll be walking into again? The current role that I'm in, it was a lot of conversations with the executive team of like, these changes would be made. Is that okay? So, I mean, it's learnings like that, knowing that you have an ability to make a huge impact as a PM if you have a vision, but it has to be a collective group, and you have to have people behind you.
Megan, I mean, asking you about the future of this role, how would you like to see the role of PM evolve, let's say, 10 years from now?
That depends on like the future unfolding in a direction that I see, whether that pans out or not. There are days when I wake up and I think, well, look, I don't mean to scare anybody here, but there are days when I wake up and think, my job might be irrelevant in a few years. I think that's just like graduating during the financial crisis from university. You just kind of have this like built-in, at least for me, like this expectation that I can't take anything for granted, right? So I don't know, obviously, how that's going to pan out, given that there's more jobs for product managers every single year, and it's a discipline that's growing in most markets with a tech economy of at least like 20% of the city's economy. Like, I don't see any signs of the product management discipline slowing down. I think that the PM role being so young, it's sort of like a mix of so many things. You don't really know what you're going to get. Even in an interview process, people could be telling you, oh, we empower our product teams and product managers get to own their profit and loss statement and so forth, but you don't really know until you get there. I think that the role is in a bundled stage right now, where you have a little bit of some UX experience and you have a little bit of, you need to figure out how to bring this product to market. You have all these different disciplines rolled into one. I think the product management discipline will likely unbundle, presuming that it continues in the next 10 years. And by that I mean, for example, right now you might be noticing the rise of product operations. There's already a slice of this role being kind of carved out with a huge industry behind it, right? ProdPad, Product Board, Asana, all of these products that are making the operational part of the discipline easier through other products, kind of meta. You're seeing more technical product managers, growth product managers, and so forth. So I think the role will unbundle into more specialties, especially as I think that in 10 years there will not be such a distinction between the tech industry and all the other industries, because tech will just be integral to all those industries, and then tech itself will unbundle, I think.
I honestly have no idea. I came up in product management at Microsoft back when we still called it program management.
Yeah.
And what that meant was I sat in my office and curated beautiful documents that nobody ever read. I was never allowed to even talk to the developers. They were on a different floor, their own offices. As a former engineer myself, I was, bored by that. So, and then I saw it become more, then we have technical PMs working closely with a business person. And that was a little boring too, because it's like I had all the tech, but I had none of the strategy and vision. And then after that, we're in the iteration where we are now, which is a good product manager understands the business, understands the tech, just enough that you can have a good strategy and vision and share that vision and drive everything for your company's product. The rise of the niche PM, absolutely. Like, there are data PMs, that's what I was. There are business PMs, analysis PMs. I would never want someone who has like a sales background to be a data PM. It's just a completely different set of skills and experience, but both profiles have places they can be in product.
So 10 years ago, I was not yet in product, and I got into product by accident. And actually, I would rather share like how that accident happened in case it could be helpful for anybody. So I became a product manager without really knowing what that role was, or the fact that I was doing a role like that. And I suspect that this is actually more common than we might recognize. And I had left Microsoft. I was there for almost 3 years, and I wanted to make a change on like as many vectors in my career as I possibly could. I wanted to go from big giant corporation to a tiny little startup, 23rd employee. They gave me a Jordan jersey when I joined, case number 23. And it was like, yeah, it was about health and nutrition, which was a passion of mine. And so I said, okay, I'll take any job at this company because it's aligned with my values and my mission, and I don't care what I have to do, I know it's supposed to be in this direction. And I took that leap, took like a huge pay cut, but was willing to do it for the sake of what I wanted to do. And when I got there, they said, okay, great, you're an account manager, and your job is to close a deal. So yeah, that's kind of like sales, but this deal is that you need to close Microsoft. We need to sell to them. And so I could not escape the hand that fed me, and I had to figure out how to land Microsoft as a customer for this startup. I promise I'm going to your question. I realized that Microsoft would not become a customer of this tiny little nutrition startup unless we had an app on the Windows Phone platform, because back in the day they felt that that could stand a chance against iOS and Android. And they would not, like the startup, of course, at 22 people and me, would not invest their precious engineering time in an app with no, like, an ecosystem with no users. And so it was a chicken and egg problem. So what I learned at that time was that Microsoft would issue a $25,000 tax-free grant to any startup who built an app on the Windows Phone platform. I applied for the grant, we got the grant, and then I Googled, how do you build app? Windows Phone. Yeah. And then I found a company in Belarus. I'm not even joking. I'm like 20-something in San Francisco. I find this company in Belarus. I get an estimate of $18,000. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Like, can I have the other 7? But that's enough. And I worked with this team. The VP of product at this company was just like, okay, she's clearly willing to do whatever she needs to do to go land this deal with Microsoft. We made the app in 4 months, launched, got like 4.5 stars in the App Store. We got this $1 million contract with Microsoft, and then the VP of product at this startup said, you need to move on to the product team because you're a builder. My advice, not necessarily to myself 10 years ago, but maybe to others who are in a moment where they want to make a change, is like color outside the lines. Because if you do, you'll either learn a lot if it doesn't work out, or it might work in your favor in a direction you don't even know of. And people, at least I appreciate boldness, and I want to be Denise's friend here, but I have to say, I'm also hiring. So like, so color outside the lines, find a way to like make moves that others are not seeing and go with that.
When we talk about the past, it's like, and you see somebody, starting the journey, or whether maybe they're not sure, or maybe they're accidentally product managers, it's always good to make this self-awareness and reflection about, oh, when I was there, I should have thought about this, and you realize later, of course. So hopefully your stories can inspire our students and professionals in that path right now. So I would like to close the panel discussion with a topic which is gender diversity. As here in CODOP, it's something that we really consider important. We are encouraging opportunities in tech, especially for women, trans and non-binary students and professionals. So I would like to know, according to your experiences, and you've been traveling and around the world, working for different companies, so you have a broad experience there. How would you describe gender diversity in this role?
There's a very long conversation behind this question, but honestly, all I can say is depends on the type of product management. Until I met Rosario, who works for me, I had never met another female data product manager. There's a lot of women in product management. It's one of the more diverse technical disciplines, but it depends what type of product management.
Okay. Would you say we're still underrepresented, like today?
Are we just talking about product management in general? Are we talking about leadership in product management? Because I know that we're underrepresented in leadership.
It's related, right, to the role itself of a PM.
It's true. So,
I would say that this is less my opinion than Deborah Liu, VP of Product at Facebook, if anybody knows of her, recently published about a year ago that as a distribution of all product management, recognizing that the discipline has grown significantly in the last decade, there are fewer women in, I'm saying women because this is the study, I know that your question is much broader than that. There are fewer women in product management as a distribution of all product managers today than there were 12 years ago. And actually the reason behind that can be quite directly traced to the fact that 12 years ago, when the product management discipline started to really accelerate, that was at big FANG companies, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. At that time, especially Google, used to have a job requirement of qualifications that all product managers had to be software engineers first. Well, guess what? When you do that, you really choke your funnel, yeah? So what happens? Just like any framework or hiring practices or job descriptions or so forth, all the other tech companies start to think, oh, if it's good enough for Google, it's good enough for us. So they make this requirement, and that's what Deborah Liu traces back as to the explanation of why there's fewer women in the discipline today. Now, today the conversation does not start and end at women. As you mentioned, we have transgender, non-binary. Let's also not ignore the fact that ethnicity and race and nationalities, it's not just about any one dimension. I would say it's woefully underrepresented. And this year at Hotjar, my team of direct reports increased this year from 7 to 48 since January of this year. And when I was on the team with 7 other people, I was the only woman. And when I took the job at Hotjar, I told my boss, that's not gonna stay. So get ready. And what has happened this year is I have invested a lot of nights and weekends and missed dinners with people that I love because I've been recruiting myself. We have a recruitment team that's great. I love my talent acquisition partners, but there's something very powerful about a leader reaching out to people directly and saying, are you interested in joining my team? That unfortunately that impact doesn't come from the recruitment team. Through LinkedIn recruitment, I've been able to tap into people around the world, people of all different gender identities, and today, growing my team from 7 direct reports to 48, I've changed the distribution of non-male to 44%. So it can be done, but you have to invest the time and you have to get creative, which might not mean posting jobs on Indeed or whatever, but going through your actual LinkedIn messages and replying to people who take the time to talk to you, and then going to meet them yourself.
So my last question that I think Megan already answered, but I was going to ask you, even though it's a bit sensitive, this topic, have you ever encountered any gender obstacles throughout your professional experience that you would like to share?
Yes.
Can you describe them?
I wrote an article for Medium back in April that went viral on, God, I forget the name of it. It's some tech site, I don't know. Anyway, I didn't know this had happened, and it was about this very subject. Because my career is so long in tech, and I was an engineer before this, I have some stories that if you give me a few drinks in a bar, I'll start telling them.
You can ask Nika.
Some of them are so over the top horrible that people don't believe they're real. So I wrote this article on Medium of, hey, here are the 3 best stories I have if you're gonna buy me a drink. And all of a sudden one night I start getting hate mail and death threats, job offers. I got a couple job offers, but I end up being like one of the top 10 contributors of Medium for the month. So yes, the short answer is yes. There are some insane things that I have seen and experienced in my career. Yeah, I mean, I guess my only reaction is I'm still here. I get to work in Barcelona, so I guess I win. But you have to be able to say, that's not what I will be. And be able to find a company and a support system that believes in you regardless of your gender.
I think I'd just like to recognize, like Denise with a longer career, I expect you've faced many more hardships than I have. You just said I've had a very long career. So I'm saying that, like, I feel luckier than ever that I don't have so many stories that would go viral for terrible reasons. I have some shitty examples, especially like when I was first starting out, and especially that's the main reason I left the Wall Street track. Since I've been in tech, there's offenses like in your face all the time, but I haven't had anything so woefully, something that made me feel truly discriminated or truly terrible compared to what I saw in 1 year in finance. So I guess that's not enough, right? The answer is not, at least it's not as bad, right? The answer is just like...
It's a positive sign.
It's a positive sign. I think things are getting better. I think it inspires me that, did these happen 5, 10, 15 years ago? Did nights like this happen openly with Eventbrite tickets? I didn't see them.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be able to pass on opportunity to others so they don't have to go through that, or at least that's more meaningful to me than building great products now.
I think we had a very productive panel discussion, and for sure we've been inspiring a lot of people here and also our students online that will be also able to watch this. So I would like to thank with a round of applause to our guest speakers.